I told him to leave it inside me, but the tension between us was impossible to ignore. One glance, one moment, and everything changed. How far can desire and secrecy go before it consumes you? Please subscribe to Blind Thoughts and press the bell icon so you never miss our next story. I never imagined that a simple dinner at home could turn into a moment that would haunt me for years. My name is Samantha Reed, and for most of my life, I thought I understood boundaries. I had learned them the hard way, growing up with my mother and her complicated relationships. But nothing could have prepared me for the tangled emotions I'd feel with my stepfather, Gregory Hayes. It all started the evening my mom announced she had invited him over for dinner. Mom had been seeing Gregory for a few months, and while I tried to be supportive, something about him always made me uneasy. He had a kind of charm that people couldn't resist, but I found it suffocating. I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. He wasn't rude, and he wasn't cruel, but there was something about the way he looked at me that felt invasive. The night began normally enough. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, humming to herself while preparing spaghetti and garlic bread. I set the table quietly, pretending that I didn't notice Gregory sitting in the living room, reading a magazine. But when he looked up and smiled at me, I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Hey, Sam," he said casually. "Dinner smells amazing. You've got a talented mom." I nodded politely, not meeting his eyes for more than a second. "Thanks," I muttered, hoping to escape further conversation. Dinner itself was awkward but bearable. Mom chatted happily about work and weekend plans, but Gregory kept glancing at me, asking questions that seemed innocent on the surface but carried an underlying weight I couldn't ignore. He asked about school, my friends, even my hobbies, but the way he lingered on my answers, the way his smile sometimes felt too personal, made me uncomfortable. After dinner, Mom went to clean the kitchen, and Gregory invited me to sit with him in the living room. Reluctantly, I did. I tried to keep the conversation neutral, talking about school projects and my upcoming soccer games, but he steered it subtly toward more personal topics. "Sam," he said softly, leaning back in his chair, "do you ever feel like you're carrying things inside, things you can't tell anyone?" I hesitated. The question made me tense. I had learned long ago that some feelings were better kept to myself. But something about his tone, a mix of concern and insistence, made me blur the line. I guess, I said carefully. Sometimes. Everyone does, right? He nodded, his expression unreadable. I know I did at your age. There were moments when I felt completely alone, even when people were around. You don't have to tell me, of course, but sometimes it helps to let it out. I could feel the weight of his gaze. Something in the air shifted, and for a fleeting moment, I almost believed that he cared. But instinctively, I knew I couldn't trust this feeling. I swallowed hard and said what I thought would protect me. Sometimes, it's better to just let it stay inside. Some things are easier if you keep them to yourself. Gregory's eyes lingered on me, his expression unreadable. He didn't press, which was a relief, but I could feel that he noticed the tension in my voice. He leaned back and gave a small, almost approving smile, as if respecting my decision, but inside, I felt trapped by my own words. I had tried to protect myself by closing the door on my feelings, but now that door felt like a cage. The evening ended with Mom calling us to help clean up. Gregory left shortly after, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But that night, lying in my room, I couldn't shake the memory of our conversation. I kept replaying his eyes, the tone of his voice, and the way I had tried to assert control by saying, "Let it stay inside me." Days turned into weeks, and Gregory's visits became more frequent. Each time, he would try to engage me in conversation, sometimes gentle, sometimes probing. I maintained my distance, carefully constructing walls around myself. I told myself it was for my own protection, and I reminded myself constantly that some things were not meant to be shared. But there were moments when his attention unnerved me in ways I couldn't articulate. A casual touch on the shoulder, a lingering glance, the way he sometimes leaned closer when I spoke, all of it made me hyper-aware of my own vulnerability. I wanted to run, to escape, but I couldn't find a way to express the fear that was gnawing at me. One rainy evening, I found myself alone with him again. Mom had gone to a late meeting, and Gregory had stayed behind to help with some paperwork. I tried to focus on my homework, but I could feel his presence behind me. "Samantha," he said softly, almost a whisper, "I've noticed you've been distant lately. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I want you to know I'm here for you." I froze. I wanted to flee, but my body betrayed me. There was something in his voice that made me hesitate. For a long moment, I stared at my notebook, trying to pretend I was engrossed in math problems I didn't understand. I told you, I said finally, keeping my voice steady, some things are better left inside. That's just how I cope. He nodded slowly, almost thoughtfully. I understand, Sam. Really. I won't push. But, if you ever change your mind, even just a little, you can talk to me. I swallowed hard and forced a small nod, too tense to speak further. That night, I cried silently under my blankets, torn between relief and dread. Relief that he had respected my boundary, dreaded how much his presence seemed to affect me despite myself. Weeks later, Mom noticed my quiet mood. She asked me if everything was okay at home, and I nodded, insisting I was fine. I couldn't tell her what I felt, it was too complicated, too tangled. And I couldn't admit it even to myself, not fully. So I kept it inside, just as I had told Gregory the first would. Time passed, and I began to notice changes in myself. I was more anxious, more cautious. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every word, every look, as if searching for hidden meanings. I hated this version of myself, the version that felt simultaneously curious and wary, drawn and repelled. I wanted to be normal, to feel safe, to not be haunted by a mixture of fear and something I couldn't define. It was on one quiet Sunday afternoon that everything came to a head. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when Gregory joined me with a cup of coffee. He sat down carefully, as if conscious of boundaries, but the intensity in his eyes made my stomach tighten. "Samantha," he said softly, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about keeping things inside. I respect that, I do. But I also want you to know that carrying everything alone, it can weigh you down more than you realize." I closed my book, feeling my pulse quicken. I know. I don't know how to explain it. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You don't have to explain. You don't have to say a word if you don't want to. I want to make sure you feel safe." His words were careful, almost clinical, but there was an undeniable warmth behind them. And for the first time, I realized that perhaps my decision to keep everything inside wasn't protecting me, it was isolating me. But admitting that would require trust, something I had learned to withhold. I think I'm okay," I said finally, keeping my tone neutral. He gave a small, understanding smile. "That's all I need for now. Just know that you're not alone." Even though he didn't press, I felt the weight of the unspoken tension between us. His presence was comforting in one sense, but it also reminded me of my own vulnerability. I had told him to let it stay inside, but in doing so, I had built a wall between myself and someone who could have been an ally, someone who might have helped me navigate the complicated feelings I didn't fully understand. Months passed. I continued to protect myself by keeping my feelings private. But the memory of that night, the intensity of his gaze, the careful concern in his voice, the mixture of safety and unease, never left me. I realized that some lessons weren't about trusting others, but about understanding myself, about recognizing what I was capable of handling and what I needed to guard against. In time, I learned to coexist with my feelings, to acknowledge the complexity of human connection without letting it overwhelm me. I understood that saying, "Let it stay inside me," had been both a shield and a prison. It protected me from immediate discomfort but also forced me to carry burdens alone. And even now, years later, I still think about that delicate balance, about the thin line between trust and caution, about the moments when someone's concern feels both comforting and threatening. I don't regret protecting myself, but I also know that some of the weight I carried could have been shared, had I dared to let it out. Life is a series of choices, and that night was one of mine. I chose silence, and I lived with it. But I also learned something important: even when we tell ourselves to let it stay inside, the human heart has a way of remembering, of feeling, and of teaching us lessons we can't ignore. And so, I remain vigilant, aware, and reflective. I carry my experiences, my fears, my boundaries, and my growth. And though the memory of Gregory Hayes lingers, it serves as a reminder of my own strength, of the power of self-protection, and of the fragile, complicated beauty of human connection.